Welcome to Around the Lens, Episode 3. Around the Lens is a weekly visual journalism roundtable podcast where 3, 4, maybe even 5 photo and visual journalism professionals gather to discuss the news of the week related to our career fields. I'm your host, David J. Murphy, a visual journalist with about 15 years experience in the field, currently based out of Charleston, South Carolina. My co-host is Zach D. Roberts. Zach?
Hi, I'm a photojournalist as well, occasionally a videographer. I've worked for about 5-10 years professionally and have had photos in most publications around the country.
Cool. Our panelists tonight are Nic Coury and C.S. Muncy. Guys, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience. Nic?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you talking about our profession. I'm based out of Monterey, California, about 2 hours south of San Francisco. More known for the aquarium and Pebble Beach, I guess, and Big Sur, land of California hippies and all that fun stuff. And I work for Monterey County Weekly newspaper. I've been on staff here as our photographer for 8 years or so, and then I freelance for a lot of food and wine magazines in California and do some freelance work for the Associated Press out of San Francisco.
Cool. Great. Glad to have you aboard. And what's unique about tonight's show is that you will actually be one of the topics we talk about a little bit later on, but I'll save that for later in the show. Our other panelist is C.S. Muncy. C.S.?
Hey, how are you? So I'm also a freelancer based in New York City. I live in the Lower East Side. A great part of town, also known as Hell Square, known for its borough bars and vomit content. I freelance for most of the papers here in the city, though my bread and butter tends to be the Village Voice and Newsday. Beyond that, I'm a photographer with the 106 Rescue Wing, New York Air National Guard.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on tonight. Glad to have you on. And what most people won't know about you is that you're recently married. I went to your wedding.
I am.
It was awesome. How's that going for you?
Oh, it's awesome. It really is.
It's been a month now?
It's been a month and 19 days. Yeah, a month and 19 days.
Nice. Gonna celebrate that month and 20 days anniversary, I'm sure.
We try to celebrate as often as possible.
What is that? Is that the paper or like recycled paper
I think
anniversary?
that's the lint in the lint trap anniversary, but I'm not 100% sure.
You guys are diehard romantics.
Yeah.
You don't even know.
All right. Well, thanks, guys, for showing up tonight. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it and go with our first topic of the evening. Now, I myself and, Chris, CS, we both have ties to the military, and a war journalist is someone who we've probably interacted with at one point in our careers. I know when I was in Iraq, they were common in and around Fallujah, where I was stationed. But one of the first American women correspondents to die in combat, a woman by the name of Dickie Chappelle, died about 50 years ago. And, obviously we think of combat photographers, at least combat journalists, we think of mostly, men in war. Obviously there are some famous female, combat journalists, but they're rare. And it's even more rare to have one actually die in a combat zone. So,
hello.
Yeah, you're on. So what I want to ask you guys is, have you ever heard of Dickie Chappelle before? Because I had not. And what do you think like her impact on photojournalism was?
I'm not actually overly familiar with her work either, but I looked at everything and I like what I saw, and I like her. I like her attitude towards it. She didn't even want her name on it, and she just wants to be anonymous and taking the pictures and have the pictures not really attached to her, and just kind of like have her being the kind of fly on the wall element.
What I liked from the article, again, which you'll find all the articles we talk about today in our show notes, I liked what they talked about in regards to just how back then it was simple. If a convoy was going out, the journalists would just jump on the convoy and hang out with without whoever they were going out with. And I don't know if any of you have been in that type of situation before. Zach, Nick, have you ever been like a war correspondent or any kind of similar type of experience?
Not certainly not embedded. I mean, outside, and just I think the closest thing I've got is going to Kiev, which CS and I have, but not during an active battle scenario or anything like that.
Same here. I'd love to if the opportunity came up, but it's not something I can. Especially nowadays, I can't really just drop what I'm doing. And TSA would have a field day with me anyways, as we'll discuss later. If I fly. But I have on the local front covering a lot of spot news and crime news, and I've gone undercover and gone with a lot of the SWAT team units and the police units on not even close to war whatsoever, but gone with them on missions. So to speak.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, Zach, being more the not more, but I mean. Have you ever looked into the embed program, like as a freelancer?
I mean, briefly. I know several other journalists who would probably look down on it if I did. Just people who've gone independently. When I've done producing for BBC, our cameraman is Rick Rowley, who was nominated for the Academy Award for Dirty Wars with Jeremy Scahill, and a lot of that was unembedded, journalism. My problem is I have a language deficiency when it comes to knowing any other language. So at least to begin with, the only way that I would do anything would be the embed program. But since I've really gotten more as working as full-time professional, fortunately, the wars we've had have ratcheted downward, though I think we may be looking at a couple new ones soon, unfortunately. But
right, like in Syria?
Yeah. I think my girlfriends will kill me if I every single time I mention that. So,
well, if there were an opportunity to go in with troops, would you? Would you take that opportunity? Be like in the tip of the spear?
I mean, if the chance comes along, I would certainly go. Right now, the way that the war is going on in Syria and the whole kind of area, I wouldn't trust it due to the fact the Russians seem to be bombing everything under the sun, and there's no safe areas at all, or even people you could potentially run with. Even though I have a couple contacts that probably could get me in, but yeah, right now it's not in my cards.
Okay. So, obviously, Takeshi Bell, not a common name to perhaps us, but are there any photojournalists who we've lost that perhaps you looked up to, or someone you learned about in school, or someone you did a report on, anyone that you admire who's no longer with us?
Well, I was always a big fan of Robert Kaplan, and the way he just kind of invented himself, and he literally defined fake it until you make it. Even looking back and with the questions on the veracity of his photos, I think the man really did set the tone for photojournalism, even until today. I think a lot of photographers out there, rightly or wrongly, are really kind of chasing that image, and chasing the kind of person he wanted the world to think he was.
Anybody else?
Nick?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been watching a lot of movies since I've been, in the last couple of months since I haven't been as active, and I recently rewatched Restrepo, and I really enjoyed kind of that story, and then went back and looked at all their photos. and that stuff. And that's still pretty recent, but it's not so classic of war photographer and all the black and white stuff in Vietnam and World War II and all that. But I really enjoyed the kind of raw intimacy, I suppose, even though it's like a really heavy subject matter.
It was a lot less romantic than Kappa, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's like really intense. I mean, it's similar to the Natchway stuff. I mean, it's very brutal, but there's kind of like an interesting, I don't know. I don't want to use the word sexy, but there's some great kind of like, I don't know. I don't know the phrase I want, but there's some really great intimacy with it.
Maybe an honesty to it?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, because it's like really intense and like heartbreaking, but you kind of, it's similar to a lot of the stuff I grew up looking at and paid attention to in college was like the Bang Bang Club guys, Greg Marinovich and crew, and like that stuff really struck a chord with me, especially reading how they were just so bothered by it and kind of like, it was this really intense thing happening for really no good reason, and they were just very emotionally involved, where directly as opposed to kind of just seeing it from a distance. And the emotional involvement, I think, adds a whole nother layer.
Yeah, especially, I mean, they lived in the country as opposed to, even Chris Hondros and a lot of others who, we all have a tendency to drop in to these conflicts, and we're not really in any way, shape, and form, so they say parachute journalism to some level. Like there's very few war photographers that either financial reasons or whatever reasons can actually kind of live with a story for any length of time. I mean, I think
and that's like their entire thing. And I think, we saw that in similar fashion more recently with St. Louis and the Mike Brown riots and stuff. Is like St. Louis Dispatch just totally killed it. And well, that's a bad phrase, but yes, in a good way. They like really, did the best, and they had the knowledge to really approach it a lot more personally, which I think nowadays makes it.
Baltimore was a lot the same way. There was the local people, local photographers, I thought were putting out the best quality of work.
Right.
But there were a million photographers from all over the country. In fact, there was quite a few foreign press members there, some of them who just didn't even speak English particularly well, which I found shocking. I guess I shouldn't have, but I did.
I mean,
it's people come in and I feel like they're chasing after a particular story without really understanding what they're looking for or why they're looking for it.
Yeah, well, I noticed that around here. I mean, last year, and we've talked about that a lot in our news office, is, and I'm blanking on the name in Missouri, with the town where all that went down. But, they had, or any of the officer-involved shootings, they had one officer-involved shooting. Salinas, which is 20 miles from where I am, we had 4 in 2014, and they were all mostly white officers and Hispanic males. And, we started getting riots towards the third one, and it became very intense. And, as the numbers started adding up, we had the, larger press and CBS and, NBC from San Francisco coming down, and you could really tell this difference between those of us who were in the community and covering it versus, the bigger TV news that just come in and kind of, have certain questions that they need answers and then just kind of move on. And it's like there's just no personality to it.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, the subjects, the story gets swamped by that. You get so many photographers, you get so much press, you get so many camera crews, and they're overwhelming the scene, and suddenly you have people who they're not really protesting exactly, but more they're playing towards the cameras, and the police do the exact same thing. They're responding for the cameras, and suddenly it's not really a story, it's more of a performance on everyone's part.
our next topic for the night, it actually comes from a Reddit post that I found in the photojournalism subreddit. Now this is a great place to go if you want to have like a discussion about photojournalism in a forum format.
Is it pretty legitimate? Because I kind of like tend to stay away from some of the professional groups on Reddit.
I think it's legitimate. I mean, obviously you can be anyone and pretend to be anyone on that site.
Yeah.
But from what I've seen, the answers that have come,
Sure.
the stories that have been posted, are definitely from people who either know about the field or have worked in it or have an interest in it.
Okay, all right.
And so the subject that I saw that caught my eye was about bonding with your subjects. I mean, it's something that we all have to do in order to get those nice, close, intimate shots with our subject, is essentially to get our subject to trust us. You know, we're coming potentially into their lives. We might be spending days, if not more, time with them, and we want them to allow us to, again, be a fly on the wall and document what they're doing. And obviously, we don't want them to react to us. We want them to act naturally in front of us. So, how have you, and what kind of situations have you been in where you've had to, again, bond with your subject, integrate with them, and what are some of your techniques for making that work? When did it not work? What are some of your experiences you've had?
I can start. And I do a lot of reporting as well, actually, for our paper. I should have mentioned that earlier. I'm also an investigative crime reporter, so I report and write about everything from, homicide, murder, to drugs and, murder trials and the prison. But the ideas are going to be the same across the board, I think, it's just relating to people on a human level and just treating them with respect and just getting them to trust you. Like you said, it's like nobody's going to want to work with you if you're, going to be a jerk and just kind of like show some obvious signs of uninterest and just be like, I just need to be here to get my photos and get out. Like I like to connect with anybody, and it can be something as simple as music or, one of my local cop sources, when I run into him, who works for the drug unit, he was wearing like a Harley shirt one day, and I hadn't really broken a wall with him in terms of like, other than we knew each other. And I go, oh, do you ride? And he goes, yeah, I got this old cool Harley. And we started talking about motorcycles. And then after that, like, we're on a very close, cool basis now. And it's just something simple like that. And it can be something, I think, very small and really not important, that you just connect with somebody and you just kind of get on that level, and they can tell that you're actually, interested in them as a person. And I think that goes for any kind of connection you want to make with somebody, not to make a big, deeper argument or, conversation. But
relationship advice here on Around the Lens.
Exactly. That's right.
One thing that I picked up on was actually a couple of years ago when I went to Eddie Adams. I came there with a day-to-day shooter's kind of mentality, which is it's manic. You have to get the images, get them quick, turn them around, and have them off to your editors. And when you're doing that, it's difficult to form kind of a strong, intimate relation with your subject. So one of the things they taught me there was you don't come in guns blazing. When you're talking with your subject, you spend... Something that they taught me and that I've taken away from this was you spend as little time actually shooting as humanly possible. You don't want to just be shooting full auto. You keep the camera in your bag until you've got that moment, until you feel like you've really got that connection with them. And I've seen that go the other way. I've seen people who don't really get that, and I didn't get it in the beginning. I really thought it was all about the picture. You could keep that camera between you and your subject, and you wouldn't really have a relationship with them. I saw this actually happened outside my apartment. One of my neighbors was murdered probably about 3 years ago, and she had her throat cut. It was actually pretty horrific. And I was covering the scene, and her family showed up. And it's a spot news event, and it's still difficult to build a relationship, but it's not impossible. And I saw a photographer, and I know this guy, and he's not a bad guy, but he's one of those guys that just doesn't give a shit anymore. And the first thing he did was when the family was just they were together, they were huddling, they were crying, they just found out. He walked up about 3 or 4 inches behind the shortest person there, leaned over the crowd with his widest lens, and just started blasting away. Gotten everyone's shot. He, like I said, he just didn't give a shit anymore. And he got about 3 or 4 shots, and then the family turned on him, and some of them started swinging. And I didn't blame them at all. And I think the people who get the strong shots, they're the people who are going to talk to the family. They're the ones who are going to express condolences, to say they're sorry, to say that they're sorry they even have to be there. This guy, I know him, I like him, but that knocked him down a few pegs in my eyes.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say the sharing condolences thing, and it's something I've written about, I think, on the Photo Brigade blog and other places, is that coming in, and it's kind of like what you're saying, is coming in with some compassion and humanity is going to do nothing but help you out. Nobody's going to turn you down and be like, oh, that guy's too nice of a guy, I'm not going to and it doesn't really work like that. It like you were saying, I like what you said about sometimes you just put the camera away until you kind of know it's comfortable to take it out almost. And sometimes it's unavoidable to just start shooting from the beginning. But, at least with sources and me building sources with law enforcement to get to spot news and stuff, there's been plenty of times where I've kind of gone in a little too hot, I think, to a situation, kind of ran up and got too close to the scene, and the cops yell at you to get back. And then after it's all kind of cooled off, I've actually walked back to the officers and been like, hey man, I'm sorry about that. It's just a very hot situation. I need to get a couple of pictures. And one of the officers called me the next day and goes, hey man, I just wanted to, share my appreciation for you coming up and apologizing. I was like, oh yeah, no big deal. And he's like, no, actually, nobody in the media has ever done that before, and I really appreciate it. I was like, yeah, I felt kind of bad for how I, acted originally, and if I can have a good working relationship with you guys, we both can do our jobs better. And he's like, that's cool. And it's again, it's just treating people with some modicum of respect and kindness. I think just really helps.
And that kind of respect will always pay off.
Oh, totally.
It may not pay off immediately, but you'll see it down the line. Yeah, I've been in situations like that where I've tried to, and it's tough in New York because the market here is saturated with photographers. I mean it is lousy with photographers. So it's extraordinarily difficult to form any kind of relationship with the police here, but it's not impossible. And a little bit of respect and a little bit of humility really, really does go a long way.
Since I cover a lot of activism and protests and that sort of thing, and whether it be Ferguson or other places, and unfortunately due to budgets and everything like that, I can't spend a lot of time from going places. So what I end up doing a lot of times is talking to people on Facebook a lot. They'll end up seeing the things that I share. Usually 9 times out of 10, we have some mutual friends, so it ends up becoming, oh, so-and-so. Oh, okay, cool. If so-and-so speaks well for you, then you're cool. So then when I finally do land in some scenario, I already have a contact on the ground, and they end up becoming either my escort. Basically, I have a fixer on the ground that's going to help me get access. That sort of thing paid off a lot during Occupy. Because CS can say, when we were in Chicago, he got attacked. They tried to break one of his cameras because we were photographing it. But in that same scenario, in that same place, there was a place where we're all loaded up on a corner when we were in Chicago. At least when I was in Chicago, I think CS was somewhere else. and it was starting to get really heavy. They were potentially going to bring out the sound cannons and everything like that, and I forgot earplugs, and 2 or 3 of the occupiers from New York noticed me. Which they knew me by the place that I wrote for back then, which was suicidegirls.com. And so I hear behind me, "Suicide Girls, Suicide Girls." And of course I turn around and I see the 2 guys, and they had earplugs, and they helped me out, and they ended up actually basically providing escort for me for a lot of the rest of the scenario. They actually kind of made a way for me that, they were activists, so they could kind of shove a little bit nicer than a photographer would get treated. So actually from then on, even when Occupy kind of tried to retake New York a little bit, even then I got hooked up with those guys, and they would basically make ways for me anytime I needed to get somewhere if they found me. So and I think I'm friends with them on Facebook still to this day. And so it's always, making that long-term connection, whether it be through the fact that they knew that I write for this website, really was allowed me to be able to drop in a scenario, not cover a story for a couple weeks, and then come back in as much as I wanted to. So it's great.
Yeah, I explain to people when I get to a scene, and I'm polite with all the cops on the peninsula know me, and I have a good relationship with them, but a lot of people watching get kind of upset that the media is there, especially in kind of sensitive situations, and they're like, "Oh, you can't be here," and try to give you the, read you the riot act, and what, I was like, legally I can be here, and I'm like, if you have an issue, go talk to the officers, and most of the time they won't, but in the past when they have, the officer, one of the sergeants came over to me later, and he's like, "Oh, I just told him you worked for our Z unit," and they just kind of accepted it. And I was like, well, it's a little dishonest, but I'm not going to argue with it.
Yeah. Everything I've ever learned about engaging with subjects goes back to, obviously, if you have the time to kind of build that relationship, yeah, by all means, you put that camera to the side. But I was always taught you always have the camera with you and ready.
Right.
Just because you never know when something could happen, even on your initial first meeting. But obviously, it's situation dependent. So, for example, when I've worked on long-term projects, yeah, absolutely, I spend as much time as I can getting to know the person and having them know me as a person, less a photographer, first, before I actually start documenting. And that's really good and really helpful for figuring out what you're going to document, because you're going to learn so much about them and really how you want to tell that story just by talking to them.
Totally.
But in shorter term circumstances, it all depends on, do I need to get in and get out and get the product done? Whereas, you might roll up onto a scene, and perhaps that was the situation with your photographer friend Chris, who was just jumping in there and getting the shot. In certain cases you have to almost, I would say, turn yourself off to people to ensure you get the shot, especially when you're dealing with people who may not want you there. And sometimes you don't even have the choice. Like, for instance, the Mizzou photographer who tried to get the story and was completely blockaded. I mean, there's no reasoning with people sometimes, and in those instances, what can you do?
I mean, it's true. I mean, there's plenty of stories out there where you won't have that opportunity to connect, to emotionally connect with your subject, and a lot of them tend to be either spot news or protests or rallies or that sort of thing, and it's unrealistic to expect that. But if you can, I really feel like your images will be stronger. There's when you're shooting a fire or an accident or something like that, realistically you're never going to have that opportunity. But I mean, if for the more emotional projects, for the projects where you do have just that little bit of time to make any kind of connection, I really strongly believe that your photos will only benefit from it. The guy, I mentioned before, he wasn't entirely wrong. He got the shot. But I feel like there's multiple ways to get that same shot. I'll give you a for instance. Yeah, you don't have to be right up against the subject for that sort of thing. I know what he was going for, and I think he got probably a strong shot, but he did it at the expense of all other shots that followed. So when Bin Laden died, or was killed, I went to Times Square, and the FDNY brought out a fire truck. I thought that you had to get right up on the fire truck to get a good shot. The firefighters were out there. They were, grinning and throwing their fist up and, saying hello with the crowd. And it was a massive crowd. And there's something satisfying about being up on that truck. But I didn't get a really great shot from it. Mike Appleton, who was a Times photographer at the time, he went with the other direction. He went 100 feet in the other direction. He got on top the second floor balcony of another building, and he shot it from I don't know, 100 feet away, and he nailed that shot. He probably got the best shot from that night, from that time. And that's one of those instances where, there's no opportunity to really make an emotional connection with your subject, but you don't have to just pile onto them.
CS, we both had that at the Paris impromptu Paris Memorial at Union Square. There was just a bunch of candles and chalk on the ground. It wasn't like a real memorial that had been set up yet. And I was shooting with my telephoto to get the people that were standing with candles, and a couple of them were crying. Clearly, I think one of them was French and had some level of personal connection, but there was at least one or two guys that literally just walked up to the guy, literally stepped over the entire memorial, stepped on flowers, and used his flash to get 3 feet away from this person, who ended up not giving him a shot because he was pissed off that the guy was right in his face as this guy's having an emotional moment. I ended up getting a much better shot, at least in my opinion, than he could even have possibly have gotten. And yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, connecting with that, I mean, I actually spoke with some of the people that night. I think probably the ones you're talking about, because there were like 3 or 4 that were the most active, visually speaking. So I got to talking with them after that, and it was very brief. A few words. I told them. I actually apologized for. I felt like I was interfering with a rather intimate moment, and I apologized for that. And the guy kind of turned to me and he said, "Thank you." He seemed kind of surprised that I would do that, because he had been putting up with just what you described, with people getting in his face. Yeah. Well, the next day, there was another vigil at Washington Square, and when I say lousy with photographers, I mean that in the most literal way possible. There was a space probably about the size of, 6-8 feet by maybe 3 or 4 feet, where people had been writing their name and leaving flowers and whatnot. And by the time the mayor showed up, it was surrounded by photographers, and nobody could actually get in, or very few people could get in to write their name. But this guy that I saw the day before and that I had just that briefest conversation with saw me there, and we shared a little nod, and he didn't seem bothered by the fact that I was there and getting the shots. And I feel like the shots that I got from that were stronger than if he was more viscerally reacting to the camera being there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, even just on those short-term things, especially when it becomes like, multi-day events, again, I mean, like any of the protests, anytime that I can make a personal connection with some of the people that are either mourning from a police shooting or whatever, if I see them the next day at a similar event, they're more likely to give me either a better photo or just be natural around me and not react to the cameras. So
what I'm getting at, or what I'm I think I'm getting from you guys is, yes, you have a job to do. You have to document, you have to tell that story, you have to get that picture, but at the end of the day, these are people, and you have to recognize that they're people. And if you really want to bond with your subject and you understand that, you're going to have a much easier time and probably get a much better image in the end, right?
Just totally.
Understand that you're photographing people,
yeah,
not just subjects. And I can tell you from my personal experience, growing up through the field, starting out, I never considered the subjects or the people I was photographing as really people. It's just like, that's visually interesting. That's a cool portrait. I shot them. But you know what I think is interesting about our career field and different from others is that, yes, we are shooting, but we also have a lot of downtime. It's like a career field that just allows us to shoot a little bit and chat a little bit, and I can't count the amount of times I've had subjects come up to me and be like, hey, can you send me your picture and stuff like that? And there's no, or let me give you my email address. You can just, send those pictures to me. And of course, there's nothing more annoying for a photojournalist than get requested to send pictures of someone. But I think for those who, actually do take the time to do something like that kind of act of kindness, I think they're doing a lot in terms of building relationships. And who knows, that person that they interacted with could lead to something later on down the line. But that's pretty much it for bonding. I hope that's helped out, the people asking about that. Definitely a very key tool, just as good, important a tool as any of your cameras or your lenses in terms of actually being a good storyteller. Our next topic up for the evening is about a photograph, specifically a photograph of a Haitian immigrant bathing in Brazil in a bathroom. Now, this isn't your standard guy in a bathtub shot. The shot features a man who's naked and crouched and actually cleaning himself off using water from a urinal. Now, the photograph, which received an award in photojournalism, for kind of the story it told, is about sort of the Haitian immigrants and their sort of quest to, obviously get out of Haiti and get to Brazil. And it just showcases kind of the human suffering sort of aspect that, we as visual storytellers need to be able to tell. But the article in question brings up, is it ethical to portray this? Are we taking for granted, or I would say taking advantage of this person's position or their suffering? And in the article itself, the argument being made by kind of, I guess, the Brazilian government is, that this isn't reflective of the overall situation, and that, we're not treating this person with respect. But, the photographer did their job in the moment, and, they captured the imagery without objection from the subject, and they did it. And if you look at the picture, you can't see the guy's face. So, I mean, it looks, definitely the photographer describes that he's taken great pains to not sort of show this guy's face in an effort to, give him some sort of bit of privacy, I would say. But, should photojournalists be more cognizant of what they're shooting, or, as I think we are, should we just kind of be the unblinking eye of the public?
It's a really fine line, and it's never that easy. It's a simple question, very difficult answer. And I tend to be on the same world you are, of we're just supposed to be there and take pictures with, ethics and some morals tied in to, make them professional and, polite as much as they can be. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with, the war photography is kind of bringing that level of intimacy and personality to it, but also having some, modicum of, I don't know,
class,
delicacy. Yeah. I tend to be, as I think a lot of photographers who have covered bad things, a bit more desensitized, so it doesn't bother me as much. And it's that whole breakfast test thing that we talked about in journalism ethics in college.
Why don't you tell people what the breakfast test is, just for those who maybe listening and don't know?
Gosh, I don't even know if they still teach that idea in J school, but yeah. So the idea is that, and this is, since back in the days of everybody reading hard copy newspapers, the idea was that if a graphic image passed a breakfast test, that means that somebody could look at the photo in the newspaper while having breakfast and not feel sick and be able to eat breakfast while looking at it. And you look at a lot of
the Cheerios test.
Okay, yeah.
Eating the whole newspaper, eating a cup of your Cheerios, a bowl of Cheerios. Are you going to spit up your Cheerios at the paper?
Yeah, so similar idea. And, at our paper, there's been a number of homicide images and stuff that I've photographed over the years that have been very graphic. And we have a rule of if it's somebody that died and I have a photo of them, we won't show their face or any identifiable way of seeing them in the paper or online, even if we have their name in the caption, if the police have released that. But typically no faces is our rule of thumb. But, there's been plenty of situations over the years where we've gotten ridiculed and slammed for doing that. And it's a really fine line. I personally don't have a problem with it, but again, that's not, and this is going to sound jaded as hell, but it's not I'm not, I guess, personally connected to the situation I'm photographing. So of course it's not going to bother me as much as a family member who's mad that we ran their brother, son, or somebody in a photo. And what do you say to them? It's my job to take a picture if they don't really understand. Or, that doesn't really do enough. Yeah, I don't know.
One of the things I noticed when I saw this image, and I'm coming to this pretty fresh, I haven't seen it before, and it wasn't the subject matter that got to me, because I look at that and you think that something should be done, and that's a sign of a good story, is that you're looking at something and you're outraged and you want something to be done. The fact that he's in this position where he has to do this, I think that's bothersome. My issue with it was the way it was taken. And I wasn't there, so it's very easy for me to criticize from afar. I wasn't there. I didn't see how he was being handled, or if he was being handled, or if he misbehaved in front of him. And I'm reading a lot of different things about this. Some people were saying he was abrasive and rude and didn't seek permission. But the way it was shot, it doesn't look like he invested a lot of time into how he was going to take the photo. It almost seems like he passed the camera over a wall or something and just shot wide and sprayed and prayed. And I feel like there's a certain dehumanizing aspect of that by shooting wide and just getting that shot. And again, this is Monday night quarterbacking. It's I wasn't there.
Literally.
But yeah. But I feel it. I can only say what I would have done, what I think I would have done in his shoes, and I think I would have shot it a little bit differently. I think I would have shot it tight. I think by shooting a little bit tighter, a 50 and 85, something like that. Yeah, you're not seeing the entirety of the urinal or all of his nakedness, and that might be more shocking. That might be more driving you to want to change things. But I feel like it would provide a sense of intimacy. Yes, you would be a fly on the wall, but you wouldn't be quite so removed. Does that make sense?
So it sounds like what you're saying is you would have worked the subject a bit more, It's funny coming from reading the description, the way the photographer wrote it in terms of, how he felt he was doing nothing wrong. And again, I don't think he was doing anything wrong, but it's just funny the way he said, I was taking pictures and the guy never came up with his hands to stop me or anything like that. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, so you came in there, you took some pictures, and you left, and he didn't object while you were taking pictures, probably because he was bathing himself, and he was naked, but that's not asking permission. That's not saying, like, hey, you mind if I take your photograph real quick? But then again, if you were in that position, probably no one would say, oh, yeah, sure, man, go ahead. I'm sitting here, I'm crouched, I'm naked, and I'm using urinal water to bathe myself.
It also
go ahead,
has
take my picture. But you got
a dramatic problem where if you ask for in certain scenes, if you ask for permission, you break that. I don't know what the term would be, the fourth wall or whatever. You break that moment where you're interacting with the scene, and so it actually ends up not only breaking a different kind of journalistic ethic thing, but it also ruins any moment that you're building within the photos. I mean, it really reminds me a lot of the Kevin Carter photo of the child and the vulture, which he got a tremendous amount of shit for, and still does till this day, even though he's passed away. And that photo changed the way we talk about Africa. This photo had a dramatic effect. And I mean, I hate to say, like, part of, depending on what type of photojournalism you're doing, whether you're working for a nonprofit agency when you're doing it, or you're doing activism photography, half of the reason you're there is to tell the story exactly the way it is, bare bones, not to like have the the pretty photos of the photos with kids with flies on their eyes sort of thing. It's to tell how it's actually happening. And a lot of people complain that no one's telling how it's happening on the ground in a lot of these scenarios, or whether it would be the refugee crisis in Greece, or whether it would be the famine in Sudan or wherever. But a lot of people also, the moment that you do try to tell the story, which is something like this, is which just going in and continue shooting no matter what is sometimes the only way that you can actually tell a real true story. From whatever scene, and that doesn't matter whether it's from Ferguson or whether it's from anywhere. I mean, that's my opinion on shooting. Obviously, I don't know the full story on both sides. I mean, it'd be interesting to hear what the guy that was baiting himself says, but
Yeah, I'm not saying ask permission. In fact, most times I don't ever ask permission when I document anything. Because that goes against, the core of what we do. No, I was making an observation more on the way he sort of justified, like, hey, the guy didn't raise his arms up and object and say, don't take my picture, which wouldn't really matter to me anyways, because if I got the shot, I got the shot. You can object to it all day, up and down, left and right. I don't care. That's an important shot that tells a story that has to be told.
I don't think it's about asking for permission, because Zach's absolutely right. You're interfering with the scene by doing that. But I do think it is, as Nick mentioned, providing a certain amount of respect and dignity to your subject, even in an undignified situation like that. By getting that overhead shot that. Again, it felt like a spray and pray kind of photo, and it didn't seem like he invested much time into taking it. And again, I wasn't there. I could be totally wrong, but the image doesn't really portray that. It looks like something that's taken very quickly. It
may have been taken very quickly. I mean, it may have been something that just happened. A lot of the times, the moments that occur happen very quickly.
On how difficult it is to be in that situation, you're not going to tell the story just by getting a couple of shots and then moving on. You really need to stay there and think about how you're going to frame it. Think about how you're presenting. Not throwing up your hands. That's not giving permission to shot. You don't need to take it, but I would still do your best to try and give this person the dignity that you would want. even if it is an undignified situation, especially if it's an undignified situation.
Yeah, I think the photographer did try, or at least the way he made it sound and the way he positioned the image. Obviously, we don't see his whole take. He could have spent another 10 minutes photographing this guy and getting
I would be
different
interested in
angles.
seeing the rest of that take. Yeah.
Maybe I can get him on. I don't know. We'll see. The power of the podcast. We'll see. But yeah, again, I don't see any qualms with documenting something like that. I think we go into situations that are ugly and that are gross and that showcase the deepest, darkest parts of the human being, and we have to document everything, and we can't be judged for that because that's our job. And
I'm not arguing that we should judge what he took a photo of. I'm arguing that he could have done it a little bit differently. I think the subject matter is incredibly important, and I give him a lot of credit for being there when other people aren't.
Okay, so you're in the same situation he is in. You're documenting these refugees, these Haitian refugees. You walk into the bathroom and find a guy naked, crouching, washing himself, and you're in the water. You're the photographer. What do you do?
I would take the shot down to his level. I honestly would.
I think one of the problems we kind of have here is the fact that we're seeing a single image out of what likely is a long-form photo essay. And if I've taken a bunch of photo essays that if you took one image out of all of them, yeah, it could easily be ripped apart and discussed on why. Like, the fact is there 4 photos where beforehand within an essay that follows this guy? Is there like a photo afterwards where he's talking to him, where he's close? So I mean, this is one of the, again, Monday night quarterbacking and everything like that. I see what CS is saying. I definitely would have taken the shot different if the potential was there. I mean, we don't know if the potential was there, but to stay away from being a Reddit comment thread, I would lean. What I don't understand is I'm surprised that it's a massively award-winning shot. But I'm
that's a whole nother
really bad
conversation.
judge on that, considering what was last year's World Press photo was a car from a distance that supposedly something was happening in. So I mean, I don't get what award-winning shots are half the time anyway. So
yeah, I don't think it was necessarily award-winning based on the quality of the shot. I think it's just the subject matter it represented and the story it told, and that's what won it the award.
Oh yeah, I mean, if it's depending on whether it's a journalism award or a photography award, I think it's a photography award. I mean, I just feel like any of those, they need to be a be a good photo, which this is not really a super strong photo.
Right. All right. Well, let's move on to our final topic of the evening. And that's all about you, Mr. Coury, Mr. Nic Coury.
Oh, boy.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us your story?
Yeah. So is my audio still sounding good? I had to switch.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I had my laptop that I was borrowing from a coworker died, so I had to switch to my desktop, which is much cooler. And I have multiple screens, and I wasn't sure which one I'm looking at, but I'm here. I'm still here. So yeah, I am. Let's see. Today's Monday. Yeah, yesterday was 15 weeks since I was in a really bad road bike wreck in near my house, and I broke my hip. And I still have no idea what happened. I lost consciousness for about half an hour, and I have no idea what happened. I remember cycling, and I remember waking up on the side of the road in the ice plant about half an hour later, and that's all I know. And then they took me by ambulance to the trauma center, and they told me I broke my hip. And what I did was completely sever the ball head off of the femur, and there was a gap between the ball head, which stayed in the hip socket, and my rest of my regular bone. And then they brought me into surgery that night, and
put 5 screws, I'm holding up my fingers, but you can't see that, that are about 5 or 6 inches long and that are never coming out of my hip as long as I keep my natural hip. So, and I'm walking on my own, and that feels pretty good.
And you can see, by the way, you can see all these photos, a bunch of the X-rays up on the Photo Brigade, which we'll link in. And he's been doing a photo series for your own personal work, right? And
right. It's all stuff I shot on my iPhone, which I had on me from the crash, and So it's been a hell of a process, pardon the language, but I'm back to somewhat normal, and So how has this changed? How has this changed the way that you work? We've had a bunch of discussions about you moving towards new, shooting differently, and also just even gear wise, it's been a big process change for you. Yeah, kind of. I mean, I'm pretty much back to normal. And what's weird is I actually covered the same amount of officer-involved shootings on crutches than I did prior to getting to the actual crime scene on crutches, which was impressive. One of which actually the Associated Press picked up when 2 officers were shot. And, I filed those photos later from the office, and the AP picked them up, and those were done on crutches. And I was like, man. So it didn't really stop me too much from working. It stopped me from walking more so. But, I don't know. I mean, I didn't. So I wasn't walking for the first 6 weeks, and then I was on crutches for a while, and then now I've been walking on my own for 2 weeks, and so I can't carry heavy weight more than about 5 or 10 pounds. I can't run right now. I can't jog or do any massive force stuff on my legs. So I've initially went back to a very small camera bag of just a Fuji, which a bunch of people actually helped raise money for it, and I appreciate all the help from the photo community on that front. And that camera's awesome. It's actually a way trick and way almost cooler than my 5D Mark IIs, which I use at work. But back to using those as well, and then I use my iPhone a lot, which is great. And it was one of the funny things I was going to mention earlier was, we were talking about the intimacy and working with a photo subject, and how do you get to that level where they trust you in a really sensitive situation, and blah, blah, blah. And, sometimes you can just switch to, your phone or something much smaller than a big obtrusive, a D3 with a 24-70, which is a huge camera. And it's like, if you just go down to something smaller, and the phones nowadays, I have the 6S Plus, and it's better than my old Nikon D2H was by any stretch, minus maybe 8 frames a second. But, the technology has really made it so I could continue to do my job. And I essentially did it from the moment I got into the ER and was just like, okay, I need to start taking pictures. Which kind of helped me actually separate myself from the situation. I was photographing, the recovery of somebody, and if I didn't realize it was me, then it was just me working. So that actually helped.
So how is it been actually? Again, access to a subject yourself. How have you covered your own recovery in the way that you would cover, say, someone else's? Because you have complete access, and you're deciding on what people are seeing. It's completely different. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is, and I can kind of just a lot of the recovery for me personally was a lot of emotional recovery as well, and a lot of that is sharing the story with people, and it's connecting with people that have also broken their hip or major big injuries or crashed on a bike or something. I've talked to numerous female friends that have ridden in the Olympics for the U.S. mountain bike team and have crashed and broken their face. And I talked to them, we just shared stories about cycling again, and I haven't been on a bike again, and I just have no interest in it. But a lot of it was just connecting with people, because it's that whole, if you can connect and be vulnerable with people and share your story, you're like, oh, you went through that too. How did you cope with this aspect of it or that aspect of it? And, the hope was, because I got a lot from people and connecting with their stories, is if somebody can, and immediately I was like, crap, I'm not going to be able to walk for a while, even though the hip break is not the end of the world, but it felt like it at the time. And I didn't walk for a month or so on my own, and then I was on crutches for a while, and even now there's still some pain here and there, but it was like just connecting with people really was kind of the big part of it, on whatever level that could be in. Yeah.
So you said you're still on crutches?
No. I've been walking on my own for 3 weeks or so, and which is a weird thing to say, like when I walk again. That was a phrase that kind of struck me strangely early on, I didn't know how bad I broke my leg initially, and was like, oh, well, if I walk again, and now I'm walking, so yeah. But
is the eventuality that you're going to be able to like run and go back to
I mean, I should. So I'm on track for a full recovery, and which will mean I can do everything I did in my life prior to, and bone grows back stronger than it was before. So there's still like a 10% chance or 5 or 10% chance that I'll have to have a hip replacement, because I could develop late avascular necrosis, which means the bone dies and they like chop off the bone at the hip and put a fake hip in there, so I'd have like a cue ball as my hip joint, which is kind of fun. But like, my life would be pretty limited. People have that, but I wouldn't be able to do long running or anything like that. But no, I'm on track for a very full, good recovery. I think because I'm young and in shape and fit and eat well and don't smoke and all the stuff that we're not supposed to do.
Yeah, that's great. And you said that you can't carry more than 5 to 10 pounds right now, right? But should you be able to carry a full kit later on?
No, I mean, like I said, and I'll see my ortho at the end of January. I'm on track for a full recovery. And it's like, I'm at my desk right now at the office, so it's like I have my 5Ds and I'm carrying those, and I don't carry a bag with me. And it's just those 2 cameras, and it's a 35 and 135, a very cliche photojournalism setup, but it works, and then it's lightweight, and so, and then I carry the Fuji sometimes if it's just a quick little assignment. But I covered, like we were saying, the best cameras, as the advice goes, the best camera is the one you have with you. And it was like Saturday, I was coming back from a coffee date with a friend and heard sirens, and the only camera I had with me was a Fuji X100S, and covered a stabbing on the beach with that camera. It's like, that worked. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you're, excuse me, going to make a full recovery. That's great.
I know, I'm glad about that too.
What was that?
Yeah. Oh, I'm happy about that too.
Yeah, it's great news. I mean, especially coming from such a serious injury. Talking about camera weight, I started getting into the Micro Four Thirds cameras, the GH4 specifically, and it was just amazing the difference, because I had the 5D Mark II and the full, full lens kit for that, and it's just like 30 pounds versus the 5 pounds for a full kit for the GH4. Yeah. It's crazy.
Well, it's funny because for the longest time being a newspaper guy, I always had a 70 to 200 and always handheld it, like no problem, didn't even think about it. And I would see all these guys on the side putting a 70 to 200 on a monopod, and I was like, what a bunch of wimps. Like, you can hold that. But now that I've gone down to like really lightweight equipment, I'm like, I'll pull out a 70 to 200 for something. I'm like, man, this is really heavy. So I changed my perspective a bit, but lightweight is the way to go. And especially nowadays where it's like, I know a lot of people are switching over to the Fujis and the Sonys, and they're just really nice cameras, and they just take fantastic images. So.
Definitely. We got to say goodbye to Chris really quick. CS, you got to sign off?
Sorry, I got to get up in a very short period of time. You know my schedule.
2 hours on the train each way. I know that is.
2 hours on the train each way, starting 4 a.m. every morning.
Woo. God, that's really terrible. I wake up at 8.
But hold on, let me find a really, really tiny violin. I'm sure I've got one somewhere. It might have fallen. And the
Zach?
couch cushions here.
Zach, what time do you get up in the morning?
Me? Well, I'm a half in work researcher and photographer, so I kind of wake up when I have to.
Nice. I get up at 5 every day. So there you go, Chris. I'm a little bit.
I
of
think
course,
today
my commute's about half an
I woke
hour.
up at like 11,
I hate you.
and then went back to sleep.
So CS, my commute to work is about 5 minutes.
What's that?
My commute to work is about 5 minutes to our office from my house. Yeah, sorry.
But you don't get to meet the amount of crazy people Chris does.
I know.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
bummed
no,
about
it's
that.
epic. On Halloween, I saw a guy in a Viking costume throwing up all over himself.
Can't beat that. Those are precious memories. CS, what do you want to plug? Either yourself or something you saw, or your Twitter, or
Well,
whatever.
I what can I plug? I just finished up with my local reaction to the Paris stuff. I'm still covering the NYPD's deployments around the city, which is fascinating in its own regard. On the military side, I actually have something that may be percolating, but I don't want to get into it in too many details yet. I don't want to jinx myself. But hopefully, and if next time I do this, I'll have some really good news. Yeah, I'm kind of in a between assignments mode right now, just kind of a really odd place.
Okay. And what's your website? You'll find out more about your stuff.
I have two I can plug. I have csmuncyphotography.com. That's more of my portfolio work, and for a lot of my more day-to-day stuff, you can check me out on Instagram. It's instagram.com/csmuncy. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, Chris. Go get some sleep. Have a good day at work tomorrow.
All right, I'll see you guys later.
See ya.
Yep.
All right, so getting back to you, Nick.
Yeah.
You know, you made this recovery. You broke some bones.
Yeah.
You learned a lot about yourself as a
I did.
photographer. Any
Yeah.
other life lessons you got out of this experience?
Well, it's funny because I was chatting with a friend about this, and she had posted something on Facebook about like the whole like I was in this major injury, like where's the big life lesson I'm supposed to learn? And it's like it's kind of this idea that if you don't see the light or you don't come to Jesus or whatever you want to call it, like you don't have a big epiphany about what life means, like that's actually okay. And I didn't like. It's not like I'm a brand new person, as I wrote in the last Photo Brigade thing. I still make a lot of dumb jokes. I'm still really snobby about my coffee. I'm still kind of an asshole sometimes. Like, I'm still the same person, but a lot of it was just really forced, or I guess emphasized a lot of slowing down in life and taking time for yourself, and really kind of like to circle back to what we were talking about in photojournalism or in journalism in general, I guess for even larger life lessons in other disciplines, is just kind of, just treat everyone cool and with kindness and respect, and like that takes you a long way. And it's like, there's this weird chain, as I've told a few people I knew, like, the woman who actually called 911 for the ambulance to come get me, she went through the basics of like trauma care of like, what's your name? And I was pretty concussed at this point. She goes, what's your name? And I was like, oh, Nic Coury. And she goes, do you work for the Weekly? And I go, yeah. And she goes, oh, you photographed me like a year ago. And I was like, oh, okay. And she was on the board of directors for the hospital I went to. Ambulance shows up. One of the medics is an old friend of mine. We worked at the Boy Scout camp together, and we're both Eagle Scouts. I get to the ER. The head of the trauma center is a friend who I photographed when we were doing a story on the hospital and the ER. One of the nurses on the ward in my recovery ward is a friend. And I just knew this long string of people. And my dad, who met me at the ER, was like, is there anybody in the hospital you don't know? And I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, so it's just like, a lot of it was, my family is just fantastic. And I lived with my parents for 6 weeks, which was hard because I was temperamental and mad and,
And an adult.
Yeah, and an adult, and can't drive, can't walk, could barely put pants on. Like, it was just a pain. And dealing with the emotional recovery at the same time. And, I had a lot of friends that stopped by and brought me ice cream and, food, and we hung out and just had a lot of good conversation. And a lot of it just kind of reinforced stuff I'd been working on in my personal life beforehand, of just treating people well. And, you never know who you're going to run into in what field and where. And, the last time I was at the hospital was for an assignment, probably photographing the newly made trauma center, which now we can take gunshot wounds in county instead of sending them an hour north via helicopter. And so I knew all these people in the hospital and was like, now I'm there as a patient, and I had a good working relationship in the hospital with them, or as a journalist, and then as a patient, and it was great. And it's like, I knew all the people taking care of me and when I needed it. And it's just like, take care of people. It's simple concept, but whereas I was trying to phrase it well earlier, is the great advice from Bill and Ted is be excellent to each other, right?
Party on.
Yeah,
That's Wayne's World.
Yeah, so it's just like, that was kind of the big life lesson or whatever. It was just a continued focus on just working with people as best you can with a little, little respect, a little kindness, be cool with folks. And it'll help you in the long run. So
definitely.
Yeah.
Now you've done 3 parts
drink
to
your milk.
this.
Yeah.
What's that?
Drink your milk. That's the other part of it.
Oh yeah, that's always good. I saw those commercials. The little kid, he grew up past his sisters, so
That's right.
drink your milk, grows big bones. Excuse me. You've done 3 parts to this series so far, which people can find on thephotobrigade.com if they're interested in seeing it. And you just published actually that 3rd part only about a week ago. So what is this going to be ongoing? Do you see like an end goal to this series, or are you just going to keep on doing it so you don't want to do it anymore?
That was kind of, the 3 parts was kind of the initial plan of like the immediate recovery in the hospital and dealing with, stuff as it happens and learning how a lot of things happen in that, the kind of recovery of me being on crutches and going back to work and dealing with that and how that works, and then the kind of full recovery of walking again on my own and going on. And a lot of people, is funny, were saying like, oh, this is something you're going to deal with the rest of your life. Like, some people were not overly, it wasn't that they're not optimistic, but there's this, even when you're fully walking years from now, provided you don't break anything else, you're going to feel the cold in your screws. Like, you're going to get sore for kind of really no reason. You're going to be stiff a little bit in the mornings. Like, it's just going to be a thing. And then, I have the scars from the surgery to show that. And that's just part of it all. It's like commiserating with people. I became friends with all these old ladies in the pool because I was swimming, which is a great recovery, low impact workout. And they would, see me young and fit looking and be like, oh, sorry, I move very slow. And I was like, don't worry, I do too. I can't walk right now, but I can swim. And they're like, oh, I broke my hip. And, it was just this kind of great commiserating about our injuries sort of thing. And I'll probably mention other stuff on Facebook, whatnot, as I go forward with it. But unless something really bad happens, this I think was kind of the end of it. But I don't know. There might be another part thrown in there, so another sequel.
Yeah, you have to do the one where you're doing everything you did before the accident.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good idea. Like a year from now, maybe I'll do a follow-up of how things are going up to a year after the big injury. Yeah. So I don't know, but for now I feel pretty good and I can walk, and normalcy is a pretty good thing.
Great. We're really happy to have you on, and they could share that story.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
really wish you all the best. And again, like I said, a full recovery, which, like you said, you're on track to do. So
yeah, a lot of it is like, I thought, those little things that I really noticed in I was like, oh, once I start walking again, everything will be just fine. And it's like, walking up the stairs is hard. Walking on inclines and uneven ground is really hard. I still have to do a good amount of physical therapy, even though I'm walking, because everything just hurts, because it's like muscles that haven't worked in 3 months or 4 months, or joints that haven't worked with the muscles together, and it's like all these parts kind of working again normally, which haven't in 4 months. So it's pretty exhausting, but it's like little stuff like that I'm like, oh yeah, okay. But I should be on track for good recovery. So
great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're approaching the end of our show this week. Guys, why don't you go ahead and throw out a plug for anything that you saw? Obviously, photojournalism goes and there's stuff created every week. So perhaps there's an image or a story that you'd like to share, or that you know of, you saw out there that you want to share.
Go ahead.
No. I think you have one set, so go for it.
On Nerf Photos photos of the day for I guess it would have been yesterday. There's these absolutely stunning photos of in Lesbos, Greek island, all the mountains of life jackets that have been piled up from all the people that have come over. So it's just these piles of orange and different colors across, just piles that are probably look like 8 to 10 feet high. And there's just these stunning wide shots, and then some by the water with all the vests that people have used from crossing over. And it's just stunning because it just makes you kind of in a different way, just seeing the numbers of people that have crossed the sea to get safety.
Yeah, the immigration issue and I guess the migrant issue is going to be something that, if you want to talk about long-term subject, and just subject in general, that's definitely going to be in the news for a long time.
And we're all going to oversaturate that story when it comes, right? Like, we're all going to be there around the one family.
Absolutely. Well, one, maybe 20,000 families,
Right.
And I'm sure once we see Syrian refugees come into this country and en masse, the numbers that, President Obama has said that they are going to come, that's going to be a story. Actually, I was reading a story, and this isn't my plug, but hey, might as well be. Of course, I don't really remember where I found it, but you can Google it. Anyways, it was a story about the first town in America. It's like somewhere in Michigan that is predominantly Muslim now.
Yeah, Dearborn, Michigan. Yeah.
Is it Dearborn?
Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah.
I heard it was like a smaller town, something, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Anyways, it was predominantly Muslim because it has 4 people on their town council who are Muslim. So now there's I'll just talk about what's going to happen now,
Huh.
But that's going to be the story du jour for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I have no doubt that that right now Dearborn and kind of the suburban area around it is probably completely inundated with journalists trying to find refugee stories and everything like that, which is a good thing, because it's always, it's like a population that, kind of just lives around us, and then something like this happens and everybody uses it either for scare tactics or for politics, when in fact, they're just right now I'm sitting in Chinatown. You know how many people probably within a 6-block radius of here are refugees from different nations at some point in the past 50 years? It's probably at least a couple thousand people, and we don't even know that they're around because we don't hear their stories until, Donald Trump, makes some citation that we should have some sort of registry about it. Because that's always worked out well in the past.
What if we put them into these camps?
Yeah,
perhaps we call them internment camps.
Well, we did do that in the 40s, so.
And it worked out really well, so let's do it again.
Yeah.
Why not? History repeats itself. And they all should have numbers and badges, right?
Tattoo them.
Let's edit this all out. 3 white men talking about this story. 3 European white men. Let's not.
Hey man, I'm part Middle Eastern. I can.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Jewish, so I can say whatever I want. But...
okay. As the white German Irish guy in the story.
Yeah, well, you're the one who'll have to burn your effigy later on.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. So I guess on the photo front of stuff, it's funny because I can't. I'm a really terrible American because I hate football. I'm probably a very small minority, but there's probably some others. But I can't stand it. But every year when football season kind of gets going, I'll actually start paying attention to all my friends who shoot football, and I'm like, well, how are these guys shooting new images year after year after year of the biggest games in the country that all these people are paying attention to? And so I actually do secretly love seeing my Facebook feed filled with football images because it's like people that I'm friends with and are colleagues with, and I do manage the San Francisco Bay Area Press Photographers Association, which is essentially just Northern California. And so a lot of them are shooting the Raiders and the 49ers. So I'm actually seeing all these great images coming through, and it kind of it's something I don't shoot or really have any interest in shooting, even though I've shot some NFL. But so I'm getting to see kind of great images that are different from something I just have no context about or interest in or connection with. And it's like how they're making images on something that I'm really not interested into, but it brings me into that world. It's kind of cool. So it's like just pretty much anything. I guess if you had to pick one person or people, it would just be any of the California photographers shooting the NFL that I'm seeing. But there's a ton on Facebook that I follow, and a lot of that stuff. I do have to say one of my current favorite people, I've been following his work for a bunch of years, is Jerry McCarthy over at Dallas Morning News. And I really kind of want to be a photojournalist in Texas. I don't know if I can say that, but there's just so much weird stuff going on down there. And I would love it.
Well, I don't know if you can say it, but you did.
I did.
Whatever's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Texas is a weird state, but I think there's just so many great. It's like somebody asked me where I would go for a job. Like, where would you want to go? And I'm like, literally, I would go anywhere in theory, because there's just so many great stories happening all over the place. And it's like, this is people living, and it's like everybody's got a story. There's weird stories everywhere, and that's what makes it great. In our field is there's a guy that I'm friends with, Joey Alquist, over in Sioux City, South Dakota, and it's like, you're like, oh, South Dakota, but he makes fantastic images, and this is a cool joint he's got going on. Works for the small Argus Daily News over there, and it's he makes fantastic storytelling images from this snowy little town in South Dakota, and it's that's awesome. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
All right, well, why don't we go ahead and do our sign-offs? Nick, you're our panelist guest, so you get to go first.
What am I saying? What's my sign-off with? Just anything?
Whatever you'd like for your plug about yourself. So
yeah.
Where can people find more about you if they want to?
Oh, sure. Okay. So I'll cheat and I'll give 3 websites, I guess. Our news website, where a lot of my daily stuff is going, is mcweekly.com or montereycountyweekly.com. My personal website for a lot of my archived work and a lot of international motorcycle racing, actually, that I shoot, road racing, is Photograph Nic. So it's photographnic.com. And my Instagram handle is the same, Photograph Nic. At Instagram, you got to add me because I keep it private, but it's a lot of photos of pizzas and food that I make and coffee that I drink, embarrassingly enough. And yeah, so Photograph NIC is my website, and that's pretty much every handle for Twitter and Instagram and all that. And yeah. So, and I appreciate you having me on. This was awesome. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being on our panelist guest today, or this week, Nick.
Yeah.
Zach, I know everything with you.
as always, everything basically across the board is zdroberts.com on Twitter, on Facebook, and usually any other medium that you can find. So
I'm on everything related to me is DJM and the word photo, like photography. Twitter.coms, the Gmails, the Facebooks, the Grams, the tweets, whatever you want to reach me. That's pretty much how you get me. So again, I want to say thank you to Nic, CS, Zach, of course, my co-host, as always. Thank you all for making this such a great show. And I want to wish you guys, of course, a great Thanksgiving. I hope you have something planned for the holiday. If not, you can all come over to my house. I'm not going to be here, but you can come to the house. I don't know what you're going to do. It's going to be locked. But I'm putting that out there.
I don't know. I follow Nic on Instagram, and I see what he cooks, so I may actually show up at Nic's place.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't eat turkey or chicken, so Thanksgiving is not really my holiday.
Okay, well.
I do have a long-standing tradition of drinking wild turkey to make it somewhat festive, but that's about it.
And I just want to let everybody know we're not going to have a show next week. I'm going to be on a little vacay. Visiting some family down in Texas, but we will probably have a show after that. So tentatively December 7th. Just for all my 10 subscribers or so right now that follow the show religiously, that's for you. All right, well that's it for tonight's show. Again, thank you to everyone who took the time out to contribute, and thank you all for listening. This has been Around the Lens, episode 3, and I'm out.